my name is Benedict. We're up to chapter 7 of the Approaching Reason course thing, collection of videos, and now's where it really all starts to come together. We're looking at the DAW as more of a whole now. We've looked at synthesizers and effects units and how we can glue them together and do all kinds of amazing stuff. But none of it counts for anything until you actually turn it into something that's curated. The common term for that being music. I'm going to focus a lot more on MIDI than I am on audio because I'm not really much of an audio guy. Obviously I use it, where I edit hour-long podcasts, then there's a lot of audio editing, and Reason is my preferred platform for that. It's easy, well, as easy as anything that drudgy is, and obviously where I mix client work and I get audio, multi-track stems, whatever come across, then that's all audio, and again Reason is very easy to use. I'll show you some of the basics, but audio's done to death. I'm going to focus more on MIDI. Reason has come a very long way, and the DAW is where people are more likely to criticize Reason, and I think that's a real shame. The thing that Reason has mastered is workflow, and this is where it really, really shines for someone who wants to get things done without obsessing about lots and lots of menus and spreadsheets and stuff like that. We will dive in with basic MIDI editing, so we can get rid of all our other stuff and just look at the sequencer. Obviously, we need to have MIDI in. I'll assume that you know how to do that. That's all in your setup options. If you do not understand how to do that, then you need to RTFM, have your MIDI controller set up. You don't have to have a MIDI controller. I spent years and years composing with a mouse, but not having a MIDI controller means it's hard to control your instruments and understand them as instruments. So the first thing that we might do here is say, okay, I've got my track with an instrument and it is set to record, as opposed to this one, which is now set to record because I clicked it. So set to record, I just hit record. If I have my device here, okay, so we have a take. Now this is what's called rubato, as in it's not super well tied to the metronome. You can control the number of pre-click counts and whether it clicks all the time and this, that and the other. We've got this performance. People will go, but it's not on the grid. Well, we've got a couple of ways of approaching that. We could quantize as we record. I'm not a fan of that because the whole idea of recording is that it's a human performance, but whatever, the option is there should you so desire. And we can right-click, and there are a few ways to actually do the quantizing. You can just quantize, but it's better to look at the quantize setup, and we can say, okay, what do I want to quantize to? It's most likely you're going to be at sixteenths. Now, most of the time it's going to default to 100%. If we quantize, we end up with now, unfortunately, that's like 1,000 miles away from what I actually played. This has human feeling. That does not. So if we go back to our quantize, if we look at quantizing something like, say, 50%, close that down. But I'm going to say I still don't love that. But most of the time, quantizing a smallish amount will get you to where you need to go. Now, the other thing that we can do is quite simply say, okay, well, if I look at my notes, where are they? Where are they too far off? Where are they kind of meant to be? So that one's obviously a little late, so we'll just move it. Now, I'm going to move some notes to be slightly before, some to be slightly after, because you see we're moving the whole thing, not each note. Because when we quantized to 100%, it was, well, not cool. Well, that's moved that a little later than I'd want it to be. Now I'm moving this by doing this because I've got my snap on. I don't want to snap to because it's just going to become unpleasant and rigid again. Your call, but let's keep something resembling humanity in here. Okay, I seem to have been just a little excited here. You can turn snap off and move things like this. There's nothing wrong with that, but I'll tend to keep my snap on and say, okay, this way I can actually see how I'm moving with regards to all of this. It does take a little to get used to, so 3, 4, 1, it'll take the first of the notes. So this one's, I think, which one? One of these has his nose in front of the others. So this one, we're probably going to want to move a fair way, but I see it's moved it to the whole thing. So I might just do that, but then it's a little late. Let's see what we get. Yeah, I'm not unhappy with that. I can standard stuff, control click. I'm on Windows, so I don't know exactly what all the Apple things are. RTFM. So I can control click and clone. This is new. You can shuffle around. It takes a little bit of getting used to, and it's halved the depth of the ruler, which I don't entirely love. So click the bottom of the ruler to locate and the top to drag around. You just have to get used to that. I again have snap. Personally, I in the arrange view snap to bar, and inside the edit view snap to 16th. So we can clone and resize and delete events outside of clips or what have you. So there are the usual sorts of stuff there. You can even go, okay, I'm going to now lengthen my performance. So it's rescaling time. So that's now at half the tempo of that. So all of those sorts of things are there, and they work really nicely. Within here, you've got access to velocity, which is what you're going to want most of the time. You can turn that off, and then you can actually access other things, including all of the things inside the synth itself, so all the parameters. I never use that. I use velocity because MIDI's MIDI, I handle that there, and then automation will show you later. But it's up to you how you do it. It is there in part because it is MIDI. You can import MIDI files, and they may have all this extra information in there. So we now have a performance. I'm going to set that to loop. So as you see with my position markers, which I can drag, or I can control click and alt click to set start and end for my loop. It's nice and clear, and I like the fact that I can click anywhere I want in here and it doesn't move things around, something I loathe in Reaper. You get used to it, and then you turn on your loop, or you can press L on your keyboard and turn that on off. It is worth learning your basic key commands because they do help a lot. You can, of course, also razor clips apart and Control Z. Everything works with Control Z, which is great. So R for razor, Q, and then you've got various other things, but I only ever use R and Q. Remember, I did a lot of podcast stuff, so I'm constantly RQ, 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 RQ. Everything else works just with some modifiers. So let's build up a little bit of a piece of music around this. So I can now create another clip. And as you see, there are a couple of options. So I can double click and then drag this out to where I want it to be. Or if I press Alt, again, Windows, and then just drag. That's the most elegant way of doing it. So really get used to just having your pointer and then pressing Alt. Want something new? Oh, yeah, I'll just Alt, and you can put whatever you want anywhere. You can drag across and highlight things and delete them. And it's all very elegant. We can shift click or control click. Control click is more powerful than you initially think. Shift clicking will work with multiple things here. So click, shift click. If we've got a third one out here, we can click, shift click, and it'll put everything in between. So these are just the basic commands, but they're very standardized. I notice some DAWs have very odd things. Most of Reason's key commands are very standardized, which is great, so it's easy to use. If you're coming from a DAW that's used a slightly odd convention, you just got to get used to it, but it makes sense, especially after a little while. All right, so now we're going to create another MIDI line, and I can open it like this. Again, I can double click to enter a note, and then I have to drag it out, but you can also drag from the front, which is really nice. That's one way of doing it. The other is to, and I always have my thumb on it, Alt, because then I can let's put this in solo because that's not going to make any musical sense. Because once you've been doing that for a bit, you actually get to understand how it's going to come out. Just as Ludwig van could sit there and write dots on paper in front of his harpsichord or whatever, or without it, because dude was deaf in the end. The thing is, you just get a feel for it, whereas when you're just punching in notes like this, you don't get the feel. Plus, you also can't control the length of the note. So a lot of how music works is articulation. So you can hear. So this musical phrase is a combination of notes chosen, somewhat randomly here, the time in which the note starts, again slightly random, but also how the note holds and releases. So if you just blip every note in, then you'll find that you have very little control over the groove of your piece. And it's the difference between the longs and the shorts that make the difference, that create the groove. A thing that I really like in Reason, and it's been there for quite a few years now, is the fact that we can actually see content from more than one MIDI clip. This is, you've got to sort of let this sink in. So for the moment, we're actually looking at the existing electric piano line and MIDI from this other one. Okay, let's give you a sense of how that works. Let's just pop out of that. Let's put some random notes in. Now, if I highlight both of those, you can see that I can see the info from the two different lines. The track that I have focused is front and center. I double clicked. And I can switch backwards and forwards with the clips, or I can switch backwards and forwards by clicking on thing. This is another reason to encourage you to use the Alt click, simply because if I go, I'm going to double click, see how I've now focused the wrong thing. If I wanted to put a note from my cello here, Alt click keeps me focused. So this is the way that I would strongly encourage you to work. Again, look at the manual to understand all of the options here. But if we've got one thing open, let's just close this down. If I've got one track open and I go, oh, now I want to be able to see the other one as well, I control click the other one, click back to the one that I want. There are various other things like control clicking these and what have you, but the easiest way is just these. You can also highlight two of these, press enter. Double clicking, if you've got your sizes not for what you want, then you can double click to locate on the size of just this clip. So it puts it full size in here. It's elegant and it makes sense. I'm not 100% in love with this 2 windows in 1 window thing. I feel like it's a bit not very Reason, because it works fine when you've got like 3 or 4 clips but then you find yourself starting to get caught between wanting to resize this or having to slide up and down. But like anything, you just got to get used to it. So I have now 2 MIDI clips, and I'm going to say, okay, I want to make some kind of line. I've noted this is a cello, so let's go with a bass line. So we'll go there. What have I got? Now, that I'm not comfortable with there, so let's... Okay, so now we're starting to build a little performance. What have I got there? I've got a D and a B. So see how I can see what notes are used elsewhere? So I could try what... Okay, that's an A. And that's an F. I feel like I want that to go down, but that may not be sensible. I like the idea of going down, but we've now got to say, well, okay, what would be... So an A is a third, so... Or we could even go to the C. I think we might be in C major, but... Okay, we now have a nice musical line which relates to the initial performance. I can select all the notes and drag them about. Press Ctrl Z to make them go away. I can press Ctrl, mouse buttons up and down, or Ctrl Shift and move them an octave. You can access all of these with note tools, the transpose stuff, or you can access all of them here. So note, what have you. And you can also access extra transpose options, move up, down, like that's that octave, and alterations and all that kind of stuff. Play with them, but for now, keep all of these closed, because that way there's less clutter. So how do we sound now with... And notice we've got a bit of contrast and movement between our two musical parts. Let's create another line. So now we've got our violin, and we still want it to be able to see all these musical lines. I can't see any notes in violin because we haven't written anything there yet, but we will. So what does violin sound like? That's pretty slow. So let's look at taking perhaps our high note. And let's see what we get. Now, the more astute of you may note that, well, that runs really, really late, Benedict. Well, there's ways of solving that. We can take all of these, with the exception of this guy, so we'll just Control click, and we can move the notes so they start to trigger forward. And now that means that it's already, the slowness is being absorbed, because that's what will happen. A player will actually start to play before the beat or before the note. It's what guitarists do when they're strumming. They actually hit their strum in the middle of the beat. So their first strings are actually going karang before the note they're looking to strike. And so their strum feels like it actually belongs on the beat. But if we start the beginning of the strum at the beat, then the whole strum sounds late. So it's actually moved forward. This is what players do. That one I'm not happy with. Cool. So, viable musical line, violin 2. We can select all. You've got to drag to highlight them all. I'm still kind of getting used to this. And a mid line. Well, I'm not going to get too fussy. I'm going to keep it simple. What happens? Now I'm going to copy and paste. This is why I create new when you can use existing. That one's an F, but I think we're going to go with, so F, yep, that seems reasonable, so that's a fifth above. If you're wondering what I'm doing, I'm simply using the 1, 3, 5 safe notes. Now we've got to decide what we do with this bit, because this is off kilter. So let's just try putting the same thing in. And maybe just dragging that out a little bit. Let's double that one. There is some velocity sensitivity in here, so we might just look at putting some velocity stuff in here. Now, I'm going to be a bit random, but you'll notice that there's an arc or a curve in which I'm using. This is sort of getting into composition, but if you are too random or too rigid, then you'll find that your performance doesn't feel very good. Now, see how we've really very simply put together something from a pretty random performance. So we've got all of that. We can actually mute our electric piano either by muting the line, or if I swap across to my mute tool, I can mute or unmute, and I can right click and mute clips if you wanted to mute many clips at once. So now I've got this. Is it the world's greatest piece of music? No, because I'm making it up on the spot and I'm more focused on talking to you. But it works. And that is how we do MIDI composition and how we do it as easily as possible. I do see people struggling with that, but learn the basics of your harmony. Got a whole other series on harmony and how to make it work for you. Harmony or music theory is not an evil thing. It's not there to dominate or destroy your creativity. It's there to give you a platform to be more creative. It's giving you better tools. Because when you're working like this, as you see, you run into problems and you need to know how you can solve them. I'm also going to add another line in here. Actually, I might just be having a go at being lazy and taking our this line. This is where the MIDI itself gets in the way, but I am going to need to tidy this up because a lot of these notes trigger before where I want them to, and so obviously I don't want that to happen. This is going to be a rigid sequenced part. If we pop it into solo. Okay, so now we have that. Let's see if it fits musically. Because it's related, it works okay. We might consider going and shifting it down an octave. Okay, cool. We will say that that's okay. Mix-wise, a little inelegant, but we're not here to mix yet. Now we can look at automation. Obviously this is made with a synthesizer. So if we find our synthesizer, which is this one, easy to find because everything's color-coded, then we have our synthesizer and a pitch, but it's a bit rigid. So we can say, I want to automate that. There are a couple of ways to automate. The easiest way is to simply right-click Edit Automation. That is the easiest way. If we do that, see it pops up the sequencer, and I've got a lane in which I can create a bit of automation, and I can curve that automation. And if these are a bit low, because I think they probably are, well, I know they probably are, and I find automation and curves the easiest of any DAW that I have used. It is really simple. If I highlight this, I can double-click a point in, I can alt-click, or I can alt-click and draw, and it'll tidy up if there's too much automation based upon the information that I've given. And here's one that people don't always know. You see here that there's a default value, which is also written here. If I just click something in, it's going to go where I put my mouse. Makes perfect sense. If I want to start at my initial point and finish at my initial point, then I can Alt-Shift. And this is now at this same value. I can put it wherever I want, and then I can do the same thing here. Bingo. So now I can say, okay, I want my rise and fall, and notice that this is going to loop perfectly. And now that feels much nicer. We haven't changed levels or anything other than tone. It's now moving rather than being this blob that kind of dominates when it has no real actual purpose being there. Now I can fold that automation up. Open, close. So I'll tend to fold that up when it's done, so I'm not having to look at it. We can also create automation points here. So this is anything that I can access in here. And let's say I want to be truly interesting. Oscillator 2, pitch A, this should be the one I'm looking for. Yep, see, it's shown now that this is, and it is possible to record in. I'm not going to, but it is possible to record this, so you can actually, if you want to be really hands-on, set up and record all your knob twiddlies, and they can be sent out into lanes. I'm old school, I'm boring, I'm lazy, I'm going to do it this way. So I'm going to put my start and end point here, because in this case I want it to loop nice and perfect. And I can set positions. Because this knob has discrete positions, like semitones, then this will if I set that to. Now you'll notice that there is a mute and solo here. That's for muting and soloing the MIDI information, but not for muting the device. Some people find that unsettling, but this gives the most amount of power. We can mute the audio whilst the MIDI is still being played, which gives us more power than just the whole thing gets muted. So we can solo our MIDI. And there are reasons to want to do these things. So if you're going it's just easier, and a lot of the time it's easier to either mute, whilst you're working on MIDI, to mute the audio, so at the mixer desk, because remember the mixer desk and the MIDI sequencer are two very separate things. They would have lived in physically different parts of the room or world, even as early as the 80s. So you can mute, or you can even just drop the level. I will tend to just drop the fader out of the way. Very easy to look at the mixing board and see what's happening, because when I look at the mixing board in this instance, if I've dropped this fader, well, I'm not working on that. Control-click will put my fader right back there. So that's all the basics of MIDI. That really is all there is to it. If I wanted to create an arrangement, then I could pull this out of, maybe zoom in a little bit. My end point is the point at which rendering stops. Some DAWs just rendering stops where you run out of things happening. While that's easy, you then often, if you want a little bit of run on, either have to set that in the render or create another block for run on. This says this is where you stop. You will notice that certain things start to disappear if you go outside the end marker, but everything still plays. Again, it gives you the most amount of flexibility. So if I am working in my sequencer, I can say, okay, let's drag all of that over there. I can move him here, and we'll turn off that, and actually we'll move that out there. We'll clone that to there. This isn't going to be a very dynamic arrangement. Let's see what we got. So we've got the electric piano on its own. And the string remix. So arrangements are as easy as that. Remember, there is the blocks mode where you can make everything in blocks and drag it out. I'm not going to go into that, work with that yourself, but this is linear composition, which to me makes perfect sense because a song comes to you in linear time. It's run to the hills, run for your life. That's a linear thing. It's not run to the hills, run to the hills, run to the hills, run to the hills, because that would be so boring. It wouldn't have been number one and we wouldn't remember it. Now, we've also got players. You might have noticed that this sound here, and we can highlight, press P, automatically sets it to playing. And we'll go into our rack, F6, find our arpeggio, and you see that this has a box. It's called an arpeggiator. If I turn that off, we'll only hear the notes that you saw in the sequencer. And so those sequencer notes, as you see, are just long, do-nothing notes. So this is a player. You can insert players. There are a few of them that come within the Reason thing. So if we look, insert a player, Reason offers, I think, called beat. Actually, maybe not everyone has beat map. Again, with drum sequencer, they were free at some stage. Beat map, you'll see in a moment. Drum sequencer is just a simple drum sequencer, which is actually really quite cool. But there's the dual arpeggiator, which you see here, note echo, which just literally echoes notes, and then you can have it do a few things with those echoes, and then scales and chords. So we can lock things to a particular scale and have it pump out chords from that. I use this, but not to create chords as a general rule, unless I put it first, so shift click. So if we leave this in here now, see how it musically fits. It may not be super elegant, but it musically fits because we are locked to our scale. And the scale there appears to be C major, as in I didn't use anything but white keys. So players are nice. They're a kind of MIDI effect, and you can get them to do some rather interesting things. Speaking of interesting things, here's one I prepared earlier. I've got several Reason projects open at once, which is a nice thing. It allows you to copy and paste between them, or if you're on a live show, you can set up all your songs, 1 through 57, all in order, and then just close them down as you go. Not going to go much further with that, but here's something I prepared earlier. And there are several uses of players in here. showing you the sorts of things you can do with them. I'm not going to get too much into the, you chain together 47 players and get them to make music for you, because that's not how I make music, and there's plenty of that stuff online. What we see here is, hang on, I've got no drum MIDI. There's nothing here, but drums are being played. This is beat map, which, as I said, was at one stage free. Maybe isn't now. If you have Reason Plus, you have it. You see when I press play, it goes into run. When I press stop, it stops. I can make it just run anyway. And it's playing drums for me. I'm not going to get into what it does, how it does it, but it's got a rather clever algorithmic process for drum creation. That's a player for you. We could chain them together and do other things, but good enough. That's using a basic Reason drum machine, which I'm pretty sure comes within everything. But here's what I wanted to show you. It's possible to do things like this within Reason and with stuff like players, and this is a very unusual thing in any sequencer. We'll get to the question that some people are going to pose later, so don't start typing until I've finished. I have my piece of music. It's written. And that's it. But what if I wanted to change key? Well, what if I did this? Or what if I wanted to go down? Not too far, because it gets too... So what I've done here is created a knob which sends out CV, and you'll see that is one going to here. It's duplicated to 4 because I've got 4 MIDI channels, and each of these goes off to a CV device. So one attached to each. In this case, it's Selig's Note View, and Note View allows me to see what's being played. And it can show any processing that's being done. And we can see here that CV is moving us up by 11 semitones, or down by 11 semitones. So this is a modifier that modifies the CV information. It took a little bit of setup, but really not that much once you get used to how it works and have done the logic. Most people don't do the thinking. They go, why should I have to think? It should do all the thinking for me. Well, now, there is going to be someone who goes, but Benedict, every other door except for your stupid one does that automatically, so... And it's like, well, really? As I keep saying, Reason deliberately have stayed out of a lot of other things. Yes, a transpose function might be nice, but the more I think on it, even after having designed one that does this, I handed a design over to several developers and said, hey, why don't you build this? Because that's going to create an elegant thing of this which scales easily and blah, 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 blah. And they all declined, probably just because they didn't see a dollar value in it, and that's fair enough. But the more I think on, if Reason had that feature to do this, is it really right? It's like how you do a thing defines your thing. If you don't understand different keys and scales, just don't bloody use them. Or go and do some reading on Wikipedia and take your best stab at E-sharp, flat, Aeolian, Spanish merged with Phrygian. Have a go. You might well fuck it up. But the way that you fuck it up is going to be your thing. If you've made it credible, people might scratch their heads. Some advanced musicologist guy will come along, this was so brilliant because they did this, and you'll be like, okay, aren't I clever? But it's how you got your result that counts. That's what makes something that's of interest. The thing is, whilst people bitch about Reason doesn't do this, Reason doesn't do that, it's just because they're looking for somebody to do the job for them rather than working out how to do their job. And saying, well, the door's job is to do my job for me, means that, well... Alrighty, but I actually forgot to record yesterday, and I'm in the bright light. Something that Reason has that is super cool, other systems may well have it, but I know this was pretty early in that for the modern DAW, bearing in mind that Vision, Opcode's Vision, had a lot of this sort of stuff a long time ago, back when the number of the years didn't start with a 2. So we've got a system called groove. Now it's pretty hidden, so you'll tend to just forget that it's there. It's under this little button here called groove. Now here's something that I did prepare earlier. This is a set of hi-hats programmed different ways. As you can see, this is very flat. This has a velocity, therefore level groove to it, so performance feel. And this one, as we look closer, is a little different again. Listen just for the difference. So hopefully what you hear is that the first one is what they call machine gun. It's just... Now there are times when machine gun's cool, but machine gun lacks groove, or its groove is machine gun. It's relentless. And yeah, that can have its purposes, but it's relentlessly dull. There is no spice, there's no movement, there's no sparkle, there's no excitement. By adding some velocity changes here, then we get more of the 4/4 as it should be counted. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, with the smaller notes in between. Here, how that's quite different from this. The third go round is actually using exactly the same velocity thing, but as you see, the notes are shaken a little. They're grooved. So some of them are earlier and some of them are late. Our snares are coming in a little early, not exactly at the same timing each, and all of these are shaken up a little. I did that by hand. You can play this in if you're good at playing grooves, or if you're terrible at playing grooves like me, you can still play it in and then apply a small amount of it. So we've got these 3 grooves. We'll run through them again. And they give us a sense of different performance. So if I press my P button, focus, we've got this exactly as programmed, relatively flat. So with no changes, no mix changes, no anything changes other than this groove, which is this, we've suddenly got this a lot clearer. So there's less work for the mixing stage because we've already pointed out the groove quite strongly. The way that I got that here is you can see user 6, I've highlighted this groovy groove, chosen the one that I'm going to use because you've got access to a whole lot of different things and lots of presets and what have you. You can turn it off and you can commit to groove, which actually prints all the notes exactly that way. So I've chosen them, I've applied that to everything that's relevant, and then down here we can apply what's happening. We can use a global shuffle, but I've already printed a shuffle here, so I'm not going to use that. And then we can apply it from nothing, a little bit, you will notice particularly the bass. Big and floppy. Tightens up. We've got the reverb in this mix, and that actually helps it to be clearer to hear. So it's tightening everything up because I've changed the length of these notes as well. They're shortened, and so I'm using length of note to emphasize groove and perceived loudness as well. You can use this for straight quantizing. You can use this to slide things backwards and forwards in the grid. If I wanted to, with my pad, I could say assign that to user number 2, turn off the global shuffle stuff, and I could slide that so that it starts playing so many ticks before. And that tightens up the perception of that pad's playing because it plays a little slow. You saw me move notes before. That's a way of sliding that whole track backwards or forwards. And you've got 8 of these that you can use at the same time. I haven't gotten that far with using it, but it's really very cool. You can edit each one of these grooves. There are a whole lot of presets in here, should that be your cup of mate. But I like making them myself, particularly, as I say, with just playing. It doesn't care what notes you play, it just takes the timing and then applying that. So I play something really loose, embarrassingly bad, let's say, assign that, and then assign a small amount of it, and you end up with a unique performance. And that is a supremely powerful feature, which I will admit is just a little hidden. You can see your ability to access it here, but kind of not think to apply it. But once you start applying the groove function, you can really improve what you're doing. And again, we'll show you the before after. You hear how that clarifies straight away. Therefore, we don't need to use as much processing on the mix when we get round to doing the mixing, which is a good thing. There is MIDI Out. Reason were resistant to MIDI Out for a long time, and then MIDI Out finally came. We can focus this guy. We're not going to hear anything because A, I have no hardware anymore. I got rid of the stupid stuff, even when I just got stupider and rebought some of it. But firstly, we assign a MIDI output. If you've got MIDI gear, you need to understand this. If you don't, it's irrelevant. Skip this section. So you can choose where your MIDI is going to. You have to choose MIDI channel. Generally, you'll have a different instrument on each MIDI channel. So my Casio CZ might be on MIDI channel 1. My EMU Emax might be on channels 2 through 8, and so on and so forth. If you are doing the program number thing, at the beginning, you can send a program change, which can be up to 128. People go, oh, but it's like, yeah, again, be pleased with what you got. You can then also use it to send CV out. Now, I'm not going to pretend to know a lot about how this works because, as I said, I don't have MIDI gear, and where I did try it with Reason, it was just so I got rid of it. So we can fly in CV from, oh look, Pulsar, flying in some CVs and lots of CVs and what have you, RTFM on this. And we can say, okay, I'm going to apply some of this, and I'm going to apply some of this. And so it allows you to send CV out, which can also be driven by the sequencer, because this one has if you had been paying attention assiduously, a sequencer thing. So it can have notes just like anything else, and you can control external gear should you be so afflicted with it. That's enough on that. It's there. If you have external gear, you need to know how to do that yourself. Now, audio. So we need to obviously work out how to get some audio. Some people are like, oh, but pick up your bass guitar and play it, dude. Yeah, okay, pick up your bass guitar and play it, dude. Don't tell me what to do. The easiest way, obviously, is to take something and go bounce in place. Give it a few moments whilst it thinks about it. It's taken our MIDI clip, it's muted that, and we have audio. I showed you this before. We can take that and normalize it. It's just normalized exactly what it's hearing. So now it's exactly what we had before. If I turn that down. Cool. What we do with said audio is we can put it into several edit modes, which we'll come back to in a mo. But out on the sequencer, we can do all the usual things. We can chop it, we can normalize it, we can reverse bits of it. We can also do crossfading. So we can say, okay, I want to crossfade that. So if we press the X key, which is far easier, drag this across. Okay, now I've got some crossfading. Let's reverse that because being all going in the same direction is boring. Now there's a little bit of clicking there. That's going to happen because of the way that we did this. So you can do one of a couple of things. We can do a fade in like this, which we can drag like this, or you can do them very small. Mostly Reason stuff doesn't click. It's probably because of something I've got in the mixing here. I've now taken my piece of audio and made it something or other. If I want this piece and I go, okay, now I can undo its reverse, so we've reversed the reverse, and I think that I just want to have that little bit there. That clip, I say, okay, look, I think it's too loud, so I can just change its level there. You've got a level handle here as well. If I say, oh, that's probably not the right note, we can just transpose it. That's your basic audio handling up on the sequencer. All the same things, all makes perfect sense. The crossfading, you've got to get a little bit used to. Oh, something else with crossfading is that you can, when you zoom in enough, actually control your crossfade. If you want to locate what you're viewing, then you can just highlight what you're after, press Z, and it will zoom into where you want to be, or put it to screen. That's all of that. If we open this, we can then put it into various modes. There is a slice edit. Go back and have a look at Rex. You saw that happening there. Vocal edit, this messes with things, but that's your Melodyne type thing. It's as good as any other kind of thing. I loathe it, but not because of Reason. It's just because I loathe auto-tune, Melodyne, any of those sorts of things, but it does work, and it works as well as you want to use it. And then there's Comp Edit, which we will go over in a moment. Now, if I've got this performance and I say, no, that's a great performance, that's exactly what I want, I can then render that. So I go into my advanced mixer channels, I choose the one that I want, let's say here. I go loop, new tracks in song. I can choose what's done. I can go none in this case. So it's the loop, it's none, it's just going to go that bit there, and now I have a new audio take. We'll drag this back up here so that it's here, and if I mute that, great, just like I bought one. Now, here's the thing to really know. If you've used audio uses a lot of memory, and Reason, whether you like it or not, includes everything. A lot of DAWs, they access files from outside. They point to files. With Reason, they pack it all into the project file. It can make for large project files. I like the one project file. I don't like the stuff splattered all over my drive for one song. However, even though I've deleted that audio, it's still going to be in the memory of this. So I save and optimize. It's really important. Now, I had to learn this where I was doing 2-hour podcasts, because that's a lot of audio, even in mono. It's a lot of memory, and every time I made edits like this, Reason is remembering those edits, and the thing is bloating, and it was causing Reason to chug. And I found the same with 200 track mixes. Just too much. And that's a limit. It's an inevitability of this choice. But I'm an edge case in ever even trying those things. The solution is delete what you don't need. You can render these down as I showed you, and then save and optimize. By doing a save and optimize, it dumps everything that's not actually in use. So it is elegant, and it does solve the problem, unless you've got a project that's just physically too big for Reason. And it's unlikely you'll be doing those things anyway, because they're rare. Let's record something. We're going to create an audio track. So I can right-click anywhere, add an audio track, which is that one there. I've now got an audio track. It's brightly colored, and it's set to record. Where it's set to record from, we need to work out. You can have a mono input, a stereo input. It's offering me this electric piano. Now, to get there, we need to look at the rack, we can get rid of the mixer, and this is a little kooky, but it allows you to record within Reason, and this was a stunning feature when it first came out. May not seem so much now, but we can set any audio anywhere, any mix channel or whatever in Reason as a record source. So we tick this and says, this is now a record source. It doesn't mean anything's happening until you choose it. So I want stereo input and electric piano. See how it's intelligent? It works out what we're going to want to do. So I choose this. For my play, I make sure this is record enabled. I don't want that to be record enabled because I don't want MIDI here. And I set this to click and to record. You see I'm going round and round, but the audio isn't really changing, because when I open this, we'll turn that click off. When I open this, I go into comp edit. Comp means compile. So this shows the various passes or takes, the recordings that I've got, all on top of each other. This one here, well, there's nothing in it, so I can get rid of it. So I can delete comp row. I've got various ways that I can hear this. So for the moment, I can just say I want to listen to just this track, that take, and your takes are upside down. I know that makes sense to some. I'd rather see them the other way around. You can always rearrange them. Take 1, take 2, take 3. Depends whether you think bottom up or bottom down. To me, that's a little bit computery. Some people will go, oh, well, your later takes are likely to be better. I'm a big fan of the first take. Now, these are not takes of the same performance. I'm just playing. So what we actually hear here is going to be a bit pointless. But the idea of me playing the same thing over and over is just, well, it's crazy talk. So we can listen to our 3 performances, or we can return to this mode, which is where things get interesting. You can do what's called compiling. So we can get our razor here and say, okay, I'm going to move there, and you can set this to snap values. So for the moment, I'll set this to snap values, and I can say, okay, I want that bit there. I want this bit here, and that bit looks like it's probably good. I'm going to take this bit to, let's say, there, and then this bit to here, and then that bit. So now I've got what's called a compiled performance. You can see what I'm going to be hearing. And again, this will probably be garbage. Yes, there's some clicking because we're obviously moving across less than compatible bits of information. That one we don't actually need. There was no purpose to him. So this, if we grab this little arrow that was up top, we can now create little crossfades. And no doubt we can do that across many of them. Now this one obviously isn't well placed. You don't want to move all of them. Let's just move that a little bit. That's better. Same with this one. Isn't well placed. We don't have a note. Now we can pretend that we've got a coherent musical performance through doing this. There's more that you can do in here, but that's the basics of what it does. This is hyper elegant. It was probably one of the first really great audio comping things. We can then take this and bounce it to actual audio, which is done it that way, or we can actually bounce to a new take. So see how it bounces here to a new take within here, and we've still got access to all this other information. So if we close that down, now we've got this. In terms of, we may be able to get some sense of going into vocal stretch mode, but it's not going to be coherent. See, not coherent. But that's basically how it works. If you're at that point where you're doing this with the vocals, go for it. That's your business. All very, very elegant. And the reason I know that it's elegant is because it's elegant and it works really easily. But other DAWs have implemented their version of this, sometimes years later, going, look, we've reinvented comping. It's like, yeah, a couple of years after Reason reinvented comping. So it's not a case of trying to say we're better than everybody else, but just that remember this, what sets Reason apart is workflow. When they do things, chances are it's very elegant, but doesn't seem to have as many boxes ticked in terms of features, simply because it's elegant. Elegance is about being subtle, not having to overdo it. That is basically how it all works. That's how it comes together. It gets more complex as you go, but they're the fundamentals of how it works, and they're your options.